And if you can point to enough of those sort of co-occurrences, and it appears to occur not just across women but across different cultures, then I can think you can pretty reliably say that this new method of observation has been verified by those findings. In particular, because it's such a deep-going physiological change, I think that there's very strong changes in the calcium metabolism that occur when you start breastfeeding. So your calcium metabolism changes. Normally you take up the calcium through food in your gut, but when you're breastfeeding, your skeleton acts as like a refrigerator, more or less, for the baby, so that the calcium that goes into the breast milk comes directly out of your skeleton. It doesn't come from your diet at all. And in terms of evolution, they say that that's a bit like the mother protecting the baby from variations in calcium in the diet, so that while the baby's still growing at that early stage, it gets a sort of standard calcium feed. And that occurs across all mammals. So in mice, I think it's as much as a 6% loss in bone mass. But in humans, I think it's only maybe about 1%. So, no, sorry. I'd have to check again, sorry, it could be higher than that. Maybe 20% in mice and 60% in humans. So it's quite a lot. Now, the standard way of measuring that bone density change is through a particular kind of X-ray. It's called dual absorptiometry. Where basically they fire the electron through and measuring the rate of the degree of the angle of diffraction. They can tell the bone density. So you'd have to do that pre-conception and then after delivery, obviously to avoid any damage to the fetus. And probably make sure the mother's not pregnant again before you do so. So there's ethical concerns there, but I think they can be safely navigated. But I think my hypothesis would be that even if other physiological changes don't measure up across cultures, that one I would say is a very strong candidate, where it will line up not only across women but across different cultures as well. And that's something that's very that leaves no doubt from the quantitative side of the it's a standard hospital test. There's nothing sort of extraordinary about it. So that would be the strongest candidate, but information I've received so far from one friend of mine who's writing a dreams thing, and it would seem that even with the breast enlargement stage, seems to be a fairly strong indication there of the breastfeeding process going on, or being prepared for. Yeah, so I think they would be the two candidates so far that spring to mind. And then, quite apart from the pregnancy example, there's two other ways I present in another paper that can put the same hypothesis that the mirror of the dreams reflects the reality of the dreamer. They can put that also on an empirical basis. One's using a sort of pheromones. Particular pheromones will increase sexual desire, and so you can do a double-blind control test there, which should satisfy the scientific purist, I hope. Where you can actually artificially administer the pheromones that increase the sexual desire. So that's already been established that that's what the pheromones do. So you run the same basic experiment again, one with the actual pheromones, one with the control group, placebo, and then you look at the changes in the dream symbolism that presumably would result. So if you've got that kind of love symbolism in the ones where you've given the real pheromone and where it doesn't occur in the control group, then that's a fairly good indication that there's, because you're artificially introducing that, you can measure the difference between the two groups in the dream symbolism. Unless, of course, one of the women in the control group happens to be in love anyway, so get a bit of information there. You never know. But and then there's one further one which I haven't really researched sufficiently, but that's to look at for physical brain trauma or traumatic brain injury (TBI), where you've got the healing process there. I think it's very strong dream symbolism from what I've been told by a practitioner in the area, a psychotherapist, and I think with the brain scans that are available now, it should be possible to plot the actual physical healing in the brain and to see, again, is there any correspondence between the type of symbolism and the actual healing process in the brain. So again, you're looking from within and without, but that's sort of the other way around. So you need presumably a much larger sample to be able to establish it on a secure basis. So that kind of brings it all to an end, except perhaps just to say that I think that the general benefit that can come from it is to medicine in particular, if that's dream and emotion and that sort of, if you like, emotional side of your bodily life can be brought into the sort of standard medical model, I think it can make for a much more holistic kind of Western medicine. And in a perhaps not too strange a way, sort of harks back to the origins of Western medicine in the Greek cult of Asclepius, where they used to use dreams quite often for healing purposes. Alrighty, that might do me, if there's any.
I just wondered about
Sure.
potential confounders.
Yep.
Would you, I mean, some of the things that I just scribbled down here would say the number of pregnancies that the woman might have had,
Yep.
and previous pregnancy problems.
Yep.
So they might be some confounders.
That's
might be,
quite, no, I'm sure there will be a difference. I mean, because
Yep.
I think that definitely, well, I think from what I've read anyway, it seems that the first, I mean, it's like anything you do, the first time is always more difficult and traumatic. So I think that would also be the case. You would most likely get more intense or stronger symbolism in the first pregnancy, I think as a general rule, compared to second or third. Probably, especially with the fear factor, I think. So while that would, in a sort of initial sense, would be a confounding thing, I think if you know from the woman's history, it's the first, second, or miscarriages before, or abortions, those kind of things will all play a role, certainly. But I think if you're aware of that, from a therapeutic point of view, you kind of expect something along those lines. And sorry, what was the second one?
The confounders, number of pregnancies, previous pregnancy problems.
Yeah.
If they've had.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I think they would be confounding factors, but probably not in a pure sense. I think the purer confounding factors would be things like drugs in the system, or if you're undergoing IVF or something like that, or some sort of hormonal treatment. Yeah, or whatever it happens to be. Yeah, but there will be some sort of definitely effects from there, which from the research point of view, you want to probably try and control for or eliminate before the fact if you could, because that really is a true compounder rather than just a sort of, how can I say, like a medical history type scenario. Yeah, so there definitely are confounders. And the other thing that does, from a Jungian point of view, that definitely crop up is, especially in a country like Australia, where you've got people from so many different backgrounds, is the dream symbolism of the dreamer can often tend to come from their family's background. So if they might have grown up here and sort of speak Aussie and all that, but if they've got a background from Nicaragua or Mexico or whatever, then you might expect that kind of Mayan or Aztec symbolism to some extent. And that will inform the kind of, for example, mother archetype that you would get in your dream symbolism, or Aboriginal people and so on and so forth. So that you would expect definitely those kind of influences on the symbolism.
What about, we've been talking before about postnatal depression, so the predictors of dream symbolism and postnatal depression.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think that's one area where there's very strong therapeutic use.
Yeah.
Because if you can, a bit like I said with the breastfeeding thing, if there's because it could be any aspect of the pregnancy, if there's a disconnect between the ego of the mother and the mother archetype, then the risk is that the within the mother's own psychology, you risk not connecting with your instinctual basis. So that means that when you're relating with your baby, it's that kind of, will I, won't I, can I make up my mind, can't I? There's no sort of direct flow, if you like. Or perhaps in the more severe cases, there's a direct flow in the other direction, isn't it? So I remember reading an older, I think it was like a 19th or 18th century case, where this woman had such a long and terrible delivery. She was in one of those four-poster beds. She just grabbed the baby, knocked its head out on the four-poster bed. So yeah, I mean the flow can go the other way, isn't it? So I think particularly postnatal psychosis is that kind of case.
Yeah, it's very violent. It can be very.
Yeah. So from a Jungian perspective, there you'd say it's exactly the same archetype, but you're living out, if you like, the dark side of the archetype rather than the more positive side. So the work there would be, if you become aware of that early enough in the pregnancy process, can you start to work with the ego of the mother? So in a sense, and that's probably not how you present it therapeutically, but to sort of allow the ego of the mother to fit into that pre-existing pattern rather than fighting against them. And it might be probably is a bit controversial, but I think probably will be controversial, the more educated and the more sort of ego-driven in that educated sense that the mother is, then the more work there can be, not necessarily, but there can be to sort of reorient the ego of the mother. But I think in our culture that's how we're trained. That's the Western way, have that strong ego and that thing. So if you can put the ego of the mother or indeed any patient in such a way that they're reorienting the ego worldview to fit in with that pre-existing pattern,